Hey everyone, it's Alex, and today we're comparing Hope Summers and Pixie and showcasing the 5 statistical best decks so far with each of the cards. Right off the top, it's worth noting that Pixie is running a 54% win rate at a 14% meta share, whereas Hope Summers is currently running a 57% win rate at a 37% meta share. So in terms of competitive viability, we're definitely leaning towards Hope Summers being a more viable card. That is not to be unexpected, I think, because of the natural abilities of the cards, and I think that is more or less in line with the expectations most people had. But I just want to confirm that early untapped statistics are demonstrating that Hope Summers is a more competitive card than Pixie, although remember, we do have some bot inflation in these early numbers. Let's get started here. We're starting with number 5, and this is with Pixie. We are going with number 5, and this is Pixie Bast. Now, this is a deck that I really enjoyed piloting. This was shared to me by Jeff Hoogland, and Jeff did design this deck, and I actually thought that it was really well designed. It's running a 54% win rate over 1,200 games. And honestly, I actually think the win rate should be higher. I think that there's some challenges around playing this deck with regards to like throwing priority intentionally to take advantage of the Valkyrie, while also identifying when Alioth could be a potential factor, right? So there is some meta consideration and some experience required to start kind of, piloting this deck to a high degree of success. It's a little different than what you would expect under most circumstances. So with that being said, sometimes you can get caught by surprise. If you're throwing priority on purpose for a Valkyrie, then you get smoked by an Alioth, for instance, who is definitely making a comeback. Regardless, I really like this deck a lot. It's been one of the ones that I enjoyed playing the most. As we move on to number 4 for Pixie, and that's Pixie Move. The Move style decks are having a massive resurgence with the use of Hope Summers, and Hope Summers does make this particular deck. What you'll note though is there is a far higher performing version of a similar style deck with just Hope Summers in it without Pixie, which kind of gives you an idea of how the two cards are differentiating from each other. This deck is good at a 55% win rate, it has a 250 game sample, but it's unreliable in the sense that, like, yes, you'd love the Pixie, and then you throw down your Craven, you have a discounted, Magneto that you can play in combination with something else on turn 5 or 6 or whatever. Sure, that it all looks great on paper, but the very random nature of the shuffling effect of Pixie doesn't always allow that to happen, and so the deck is ultimately a little unreliable, if not fun. But there's better ways to play Move right now. And then we go to Asguardian Pixie. Now, this was one that was kind of an early meta shooter, 510 games played, 56% win rate, nothing to scoff at, but I mean, it's kind of interesting. It's a deck of multiple identities here. You do have the Wong Black Panther Zola combination, which is pretty damn cool. I do like that. You also have the Thor and the Beta Ray Bill. I'm a Beta Ray Bill truther. I love it. But with Pixie, you kind of mix everything up, and it's worth noting that the Mjolnir and the Stormbreaker do not get impacted by Pixie because they do not start in the deck. However, if you play Jane Foster and you've swapped your Yellow Jacket and your Wasp with something random like Iceman and Mobius, then all of a sudden your kind of miracle play doesn't quite make sense, right? So there's some challenges with piloting this deck, but ultimately it's pretty cool, and when the pop-off happens, it pop-offs pretty damn hard. So I do think it's pretty fun to pilot, although a little finicky at times, so it does come in at number 3 for Pixie. At number 2, we have Pixie Destroyer. This is a fantastic brew. I was actually trying to figure out who created this, because this is brew written all over it, and I couldn't quite identify it. But I will say that it's a pretty cool build. I like it a lot, and the idea of using like Destroyer in a package like this, I think, is really inventive. It's nice to see Destroyer getting a little bit of love. I mean, this is like almost classic ongoing Destroyer to some degree, but a very modernized version of it with Pixie. So ultimately, try this. I mean, it's definitely worth trying. I think it looks absolutely cool. We go to number 1 for Pixie, and it's Pixie Evo. Now, this deck has Hope Summers in it, and it should be no surprise that Hope Summers is a major component in High Evo right now, and Pixie seems to work pretty well in it as well. It's had moments. Like, I played a deck very similar to this where I was like, Pixie and High Evo actually kind of makes a little bit of sense, and it does not surprise me that it's running a 61% win rate. But if you take Hope Summers out of this deck, the win rate just plummets, right? So I think Hope Summers is better for High Evo than Pixie is for High Evo, right? I think it's the Hope Summers effect here that's really popping this deck off. But ultimately, I mean, you also lose the defensive capabilities of Leech in this deck. But 61% win rate, you can't really complain. It's damn good. A 280 game sample, which is pretty legit. And that brings us to the top of Pixie. This is the number 1 Pixie deck right now in Marvel Snap. It has Hope Summers in it, and Hope Summers isn't even close to being done. Hope Summers goes a little higher. Now, when we talk about Hope Summers decks, we're starting at 58% at a 570 game sample. This is Hope Bounce. I know a lot of people were really excited about Hope and Bounce and stuff like that, so it's kind of interesting to see that it's one of the lower performing archetypes, but ultimately like still damn good. The idea of playing into Hope repeatedly, bringing it back out, playing back in and stuff like that is obviously admirable. Like, it does work, but the win rate doesn't lie. Like 58% is strong, but there's definitely stronger decks out there that utilize Hope Summers, and we'll talk about more soon. As of right now. And we got Hope Galactus. Now this is my deck that I featured in literally last weekend, that I featured it in the video that I covered Hope Summers in, and I liked it then, I like it now, and it's running a 59% win rate, which is pretty damn good. The only challenge to this deck, and I'm going to stand behind this, is I still wonder if there's just a straight up better Annihilus deck that does not utilize Galactus. The reason why I say this is because if you're playing the Goblins onto Hope Summers and to ramp, you're not able to play Galactus into that location because Hope Summers is sitting there like, hello, I'm here, right? You just played your Hobgoblin, your Green Goblin on top of me for the extra energy. Where do you want to Galactus, right? So I think that there is some piloting practice that needs to occur here, and the way that I traditionally had done it with this deck was I would play Hope Summers and the Goblins on the left while leaving the right open for the Annihilus and Sentry combination to set them back 10 negative with Void to attack the right location. And if you're Hope Summersing, whatever, if you're playing Hope Summers, you might be able to sneak out that Galactus a turn early where they might not expect it, right? So I do think that there is some value there. 59%, I do like this deck a lot. Galactus as a whole has been one of my absolute favorite archetypes here, so it's really good to see that it's performing well. Then we go to High Evo once again. Now this is the High Evo deck that features Pixie, and it's good. It's good. Just like I said with Pixie, 61% win rate. It's legit. So, all right. I already talked about this one, but it's number 3. So number 1 on Pixie, number 3 for Hope Summers, and that brings us to Hope Thanos. Now this is, it's kind of funny, we're back to this like Psylocke style ramp, Thanos style shell, ironically not running a Professor X. I was assuming the initial iterations of this deck were going to run the lockdown version, but they're not. They're still running Hope Summers. You still have the Time Stone. You still have Psylocke. You're just getting chonky boys out. You're just getting massive chonky boys out. Lockjaw still being played here because if you can ramp easily, then Lockjaw's additional cost doesn't feel so bad. So I do think this deck is performing very well at 61% win rate, and it has a 600 game sample at number 2. That brings us to number 1 for Hope Summers, and it's Hope Move. Actually, a bit of a surprise to me because this deck is maybe it's one card off of what my original design was, and then I guess a ton of people were making other designs, and like everyone was testing Move. It was a very obvious synergy that everyone was kind of going after, but it's interesting that this one has definitely elevated to the top. And it surprises me because my original testing, I did not feel like Elsa was elevating the archetype that much. And I wonder if it's doing so well because A, you're feasting on bots that can't really read these plays well, and B, I think maybe because a lot of players who take Marvel Snap very seriously, they're not playing Hela and Tribunal and like these traditional decks that were like taking them to high infinite in the last season, and they're experimenting with the new cards. I wonder if people start saying, okay, I want to start climbing rank again. Hope Summers and is old news and Pixie's old news, and they start playing their try, test, and true decks. I wonder if this deck continues to compete with the likes of Hela Discard or Tribunal and those other decks that have been pretty synonymous with legit power over the last little while. So, I'm going to be interested to see how this performs in the next week or two, but ultimately it is right now the top performing deck for Hope Summers and Marvel Snap, and it's a good one. It's good to see that silky smooth style decks are making a comeback because I think a lot of people liked them, they missed them, and I think that they sat out long enough to be worth bringing back into the fold. Thank you guys so much for watching. Subscribe if you're not subscribed already. Hit the like button if you'd like to support my content, and we'll see you in that next Marvel Snap video.